let's move on to monkeypox.
Yes, because they certainly haven't learned their lessons yet.
Oh, not even learned. I mean, honestly, I think this is worse than COVID. And, at least fortunately, we don't have the same number of cases. But let's go and put this up there on the screen. I really encourage everybody to go and read this deep dive into monkeypox, the U.S. handling of it, the origins of the disease from Africa, how exactly it is being spread, and specifically the way that the United States and the Biden administration are handling the public health response. And I think from the public health response perspective is really where we should start. So in May, we had one confirmed U.S. infection of monkeypox. You guys might remember those headlines that were coming out. It was an acknowledgement by the CDC and by others. Eventually, it was traced back to some gay group sex. Now, that's fine, whatever. Essentially what it became is there became a major debate in the public health community over acknowledging the major vector of transmission, the groups in which it was being infected, and then second was really a battle over vaccination. And this is where I genuinely, Krystal, am mystified at how the administration is handling this. First and foremost, we were all told, remember after the Bush administration, the billions of dollars that we were spending on bioterrorism efforts. So we stockpiled hundreds of millions of doses of this monkeypox vaccine. However, a smallpox vaccine. Well, it turns out, though, that it's very old. It's been losing its shelf life because the freezers capable of storing the disease only are at -20, while the freezers that we need for the monkeypox vaccine only need to be at -50 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
So the actual infrastructure that we have around the vaccine doesn't exist. Then, in terms of actually ordering the doses, it turns out that we took months to place our doses. And then finally, this is the part where I have yet to see a correct explanation as to why we are doing this, but we have decided to basically split monkeypox vaccine doses in half and not administer vaccines in the way that the vaccine maker has basically prescribed their vaccine to make people immune from monkeypox once they get the vaccine. Now, the big problem right now, the Biden administration, the CDC, have not explained their strategy on this. And worse, the maker of the vaccine says that if the U.S. continues to go forward with this strategy, they will not ever sell any vaccines to the United States ever again because they don't want, I mean, listen, it's complicated around big pharma and all that. Really what it does come and jumps out from—
They're saying you're not administering it in the way you agreed to. You're violating our agreement. We're not going to sell you anymore.
Which, I mean, in a way, I kind of understand it from their perspective. But A, they need to communicate to the public why they are doing this. But I think the major thing that jumps out to me is, number one, for months, and I really do mean months, including up to this date, they did not want to acknowledge that this disease is astronomically, overwhelmingly spreading amongst men who have sex with other men. The reason that they didn't want to do so is, we've talked about this endlessly here on the show, because they didn't want to increase stigma. Now, coming back to our previous block on the CDC and public messaging, you are not the nation's counselor. Right. Leave that to the counselors. Leave that, to people like us. Be like, yeah, it's a disease that very unfortunately spreads amongst men who have sex with other men, and I just want Americans to be healthy of no matter who you are. Right. Let's acknowledge the truth. And by the way, local health authorities who are, aside from all this woke idiocy, are making a vaccine requirement. You have to have had sex with other men, multiple other male partners to even qualify for the vaccines. But on the same side, they are insisting over and over again that to prevent, quote, stigma, that they should emphasize that, monkeypox could also, in very, very limited cases, spread amongst skin-to-skin contact. Just yesterday, actually, we don't even have an element because it came out so recently, there's a new study that came out and it shows definitively that the major transmission vector of monkeypox is not skin-to-skin contact, and it is intercourse between men who have sex with other men. And this is not any sort of social commentary on anybody's lifestyle. It is acknowledging a basic biological reality. And then what it really should is inform not only vaccination, but our CDC public health guidance. And to date, right now, Krystal, the CDC continues to lie to the American public and say monkeypox can spread through two different ways: men who have sex with other men, and then also skin-to-skin contact, without ever realize or emphasizing to people what the actual absolute risk on one versus another. It's a disservice, and I honestly think it is it is like treating gay men like children
It's treating the whole. I mean, it's treating the whole country like children. I mean, like we can't handle this.
Treat people like adults. Tell them the truth. I don't think that they would have any problem with being told the truth, because given so much of the historic, actually real stigma that has caused a lot of death in the community, and we could just move forward and not have this be a thing. Now, instead, it is now becoming a culture war for no reason.
Right.
And by ignoring biological reality, and this just shows you the similar failure of the CDC trying to micromanage U.S. public opinion.
Yeah, and you end up with exactly the result that they didn't want to have, which it does become this weird culture war, and people who, are acting in bad faith, pick up on this fact.
Right.
And so, yeah, this really does remind me of like the masking guidance early on. It's trying to micromanage, trying to, protect the American people from the truth. And they apparently care more about a theoretical harm and stigma to the gay community than they do the health of the gay community. And that's not your job. If we have an issue with stigma based on accurate information about how this disease overwhelmingly spreads, then we deal with that downstream. We deal with it as a nation. We deal with it, in the culture. We deal with it, with activists and gay community leaders. But it is not your job to worry about that. It is your job to be clear about the facts. And, all of this, then you get to the conversation about like, well, why don't people trust the government? And why don't people trust the CDC? And why don't they just do like what they're told and what the guidance says that they should do? All of these things, which, some of which seem gigantic at the time, some of which may seem small at the time, they all contribute to this sense that these people aren't really being straight with me, and so I got to do my own research, and, doing your own research can go very awry as well, can lead you to some bad places as well.
I do not enjoy being like, I don't know about this, and then having to go online and find out 3 months before the U.S. public authorities I can easily tell from data from other countries. It's very clear what's happening. How does monkeypox spread? Okay, I figured it out. It wasn't hard, and all I had to do was go do my own research. I shouldn't have to go do my own research. Neither should millions of other people. We should just look to the CDC. They're like, oh yeah, this is how it spreads. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I'll make sure, to have a gay friend, be like, hey man, I'm not sure if you saw this. Check it out, live your life. What's wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. And yet, unfortunately, that is the place that they have put us in. And, look, and I always say this, which is that COVID, we got lucky. Like COVID, I'm not diminishing any of the millions of people who were killed from COVID. But at the end of the day, it only killed like 0.1% or whatever of the people who got it. If we have a disease that's like a 1% mortality rate, something like Spanish flu, I think it was like 2%. That is hundreds of millions of people dead. Or in this, let's say we have a disease that has a 5% mortality rate. I mean, again, I'm talking about significant parts of the US population dead. And if that comes in our lifetime, which look, we had one, and things, we keep having 100-year floods, so why shouldn't we have more 100-year pandemics? We should consider that we will be in a situation where, and I personally will be in that camp, I'm not sure I'm going to trust the initial information coming out of the CDC. As a result of that. And that's bad.
I think that is honestly a really logical response. And then, and then the other thing that is worth pointing out is when it was the CDC and other mainstream media outlets spreading misinformation. I didn't see them getting the little warning signs or, getting taken down off Twitter or being banned from YouTube or whatever.
Our Spotify feed is covered in COVID warnings. We don't even talk about COVID that much. My monkeypox monologues have COVID warnings on them.
Do they really?
I don't understand it.
So, I mean, there's also just like very disparate treatment depending on if your misinformation is in service of like the sanctioned regime talking points, then no problem. If your misinformation goes against that, then, you're going to get banned, you're going to get censored, et cetera. Even when sometimes in the end, you turned out to be right, as in the, the lab leak theory at least being a very plausible theory.
Yes.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.